Hi everyone, thanks so much for having me here this evening, and as Mike said, you all look lovely and warm and beers in hand, so it's very nice. So hope you're having a lovely evening, and thank you for having me here. I'm just going to talk to you a little bit about who I am. So my name's Deacon, as James said, and I have a son called Alifie Dingley who has very severe refractory epilepsy. It's called a genetic condition called PCDH19. He's one of 9 boys in the world, and it's non-inherited, so I don't have it and nor does his father. So it's a spontaneous reproduction. So it's incredibly rare and not much known about it. And he had his first seizure when he was 8 months old and spent 4 months in hospital on a life support machine and was very, very severely ill. And the only medication at that point that they found could stop his clusters of seizures was intravenous methylprednisolone, which is a steroid. And steroids are very dangerous to give to you, especially when you're a baby, but it was the only thing that stopped his seizures. So he had to have that, and we were sent home after 4 months, and he had no more seizures for another 8 months. And we were hoping that he would, it was just an isolated event. He was diagnosed with something called immune responsive epilepsy. He had nothing wrong with him. His tests were all normal. So we were hoping that actually at that point that he would grow out of whatever happened to him. But sadly, after 8 months of getting him to sit again and to swallow again and to get all his skills back, he had another very severe cluster of seizures. And that continued to happen until he was 4. And then when he was 4, it started to happen every 3 weeks. And then by the time he was 5, it happened every week. So every week we were taking our son in an ambulance into hospital where he was having up to 150 tonic-clonic seizures, which is where you stop breathing. So they're very, very serious seizures. They always need hospital treatment. And we had absolutely no quality of life. He had no quality of life, and the older he got, the more he understood what was happening to him. So he would be held down, he would have needles put into him, he would be filled full of drugs, which caused horrendous side effects. So at one point he was having up to 25 doses of methylprednisolone a month. So that's very, very dangerous to give anyone that, especially a small child. And the side effects of those drugs and having all those seizures were that he was extremely violent, he was aggressive, he was tearful, he was angry, he would laugh, he was just basically completely off his face on drugs a lot of the time, or having seizures. And that was absolutely no quality of life for him, and also no quality of life for me or my family. I was a full-time carer to him, and my partner would spend every hour that he could working hard to try and pay our mortgage. And we also had another child when Alfie was 3 called Annie, and who's very well, thankfully, but I was trying to be a mother to both of the children, and it was incredibly difficult. And I started to think about what steroids do, and it's quite easy to understand what steroids do. Steroids suppress your immune response. So I started to think, well, is there something that I can suppress this inflammatory response in Alfie that won't cause these severe side effects? We were being told by his doctors quite regularly that Alfie is liable to have a heart attack or organ failure because of the amount of natural ways of replicating the medication that he had to take. And something that kept coming up was cannabis. So I kept seeing that cannabis has been or was being used as a treatment for epilepsy, which astounded me at first because I never realised that cannabis was a medicine at all. I always saw cannabis as something that was used as a recreational drug to get high. So I did a huge amount of research and realised that we have something called an endocannabinoid system, which is an overarching receptor system of our bodies, which is in charge of things like dopamine and serotonin. And if we have an endocannabinoid system that isn't producing enough endocannabinoids, which is something natural we produce in our bodies, then we can get lots of symptoms all over the body. And actually, it's also in charge of something called homeostasis. So I just thought, well, it's got to be worth a try. And at the end of 2016, Alfie was so poorly that I went to our doctor and asked to go on the Epidiolex trial, which was running at the time. That's a medication made by GW Pharmaceuticals, which is basically a CBD isolate product. And that was refused 3 times because Alfie didn't fit the criteria. So that's when in 2017 we set up a campaign called Alfie's Hope, and we found a doctor in Holland to take him to be prescribed whole plant medicinal cannabis under a paediatric neurologist. And we lived in The Hague for 5 months doing that. And And it was our miracle. Alfie went from having hundreds of seizures every week to 41 days. By the time we left, 41 days with no seizures at all. So it's not a cure. It's very, very, very important to say he still takes pharmaceuticals. It is not a cure. But what we have seen in him is that his quality of life is hugely improved. He is able to interact with life. He is able to learn. He is able to create relationships. And he is not having seizures. Well, at that point, he wasn't having any seizures at all for up to 41 days. We had to come home and we had to fight for an NHS prescription, and we did. And we worked with an organisation called End Our Pain, which is a lobby group on medicinal cannabis in the UK. And we were very, very, as Mike said, very, very lucky. The media took our story to their hearts. And in March 2018, I met with the then Prime Minister Theresa May, who allowed us to apply for a Schedule 1 licence so our doctors could prescribe on the NHS, which was the first time that had ever been done. And you know, we recognise there was other families involved in that campaign as well in the UK media, which, you know, all helped. Everything helped to get it into the limelight. And Alfie received his doctors received the licence on the 19th of June 2018, which meant that he could be prescribed Bedrolite, which is what we used in Holland. On the 7th of July, I went to Holland with the importer and flew into London City Airport on the 7th of July for the first time with a legal THC product and brought it through customs, which was rather exciting actually to do that with the importer who was showing the licenses to the customs, and actually we were allowed through, which was brilliant. So at that point, Alfie had his medicine. He was getting a lot better, and since then he's had, at this moment in time, he's had over a year seizure free. So he's had 400, and I looked at my book today, 422 days with no seizures, which means that every day he goes to school, every day he's engaged with his friends. He does have learning difficulties, he has behaviour problems. As I said, it's not a cure. Every day can be difficult with issues with him. He doesn't sleep. He gets up at 5 o'clock every morning, hence my bags. But, you know, we're not dealing with the medical emergencies that we were dealing with every week, and we're not dealing with the grief and the trauma that we were going through as a family. So it's been so positive for him. And when the law changed, as Mike said, we felt, you know, the law had changed and that this medicine would be available to everyone who needed it, which was rather naive, because as soon as you move cannabis into a health section and a medicine, then you get people like NICE looking at whether it's safe and whether it's efficacious and whether the NHS can afford it. And that's where we have the problem now, because NICE don't recommend its use as a nationwide recommendation, although they don't say you can't prescribe it with epilepsy, for example. Doctors are very, very reticent to take the responsibility of prescribing something that's unlicensed that they don't feel safe about. So that in turn means that the NHS don't give money for it. So that's why we've seen this sort of buoyant private sector happening in the UK, which is a positive thing, because it is going to help reduce the stigma. It is going to help employers and the police and the public understand that this is a medicine, but it's not fair that it has to cost so much money, and especially for children. I now know many families who have a private prescription through clinics in the UK, and they're paying up to £2,000 a month for the same product that Alfie gets for free through the NHS. And that is simply unacceptable. Families who already have to deal with a lot of grief, a lot of worry because they have a disabled child, are also now having to fundraise thousands of pounds every month. And that's also because we don't have a domestic sector in this country. It's really important that we have good international companies coming into the UK, but what I don't want to see, and I don't think any of us want to see, is that the UK become a customer to the rest of the world, because as Mike said, we're not going to then see any economic value from that, really. We're not going to see enough jobs being developed, and we're not going to see this new industry. So I think we have a really big opportunity in the UK at the moment to create a really good industry where we can grow our own cannabis, we can extract, we can create jobs, we can create money for our economy, which is desperately needed after COVID. And that's also going to secure our supply chain, and that's something that is a big problem, and that's why products are still too expensive for many people, especially children with epilepsy. I just finally wanted to talk about my work with the MCCS. So I'm a director of the Medical Cannabis Clinician Society, and Mike created that to help train doctors. As he said, we have over 230 members there now, and we're really excited to be developing that all the time. We have webinars which the public are able to also come to, where doctors can be trained and the public can be trained. We're talking about all different sorts of product, cannabinoids and companies and all that sort of thing. We're really getting cannabis and all the products that are available out there, and it's important that we do that, because cannabis products cannot be advertised because they're unlicensed, but the Medical Cannabis Clinician Society can do that because we're an educator, and so we're making sure that doctors really understand what they can prescribe and what they should be doing with that. So that's really exciting work. And then finally, just to talk to you about Mapletree, Mike and I set up Mapletree Consultants about a year ago because both of us were being asked to support me with regard to the patient journey, which I'm very passionate about. I think we have to all remember what we're here for. We're here for chronically ill patients, and that's really important to remind all businesses that that's why they're there, most important. And Mike is there from the clinical point of view, and so we decided to work together on it. And we also work with 2 parliamentary lobbyists now as well, who have been very helpful with some of our clients who have had issues with getting their licenses across the line, etc. in the UK, which is really important because we want to see this domestic sector happen. And as Mike said, we created a 10 recommendations paper for government, which we're going to be doing some quite active lobbying work on over the next 6 months, where we feel that there's a lot of issues within the sector still that need to be ironed out, and we're going to work really hard on doing that with the ultimate goal of having good quality, safe supply for patients, which hopefully is going to be available in the NHS. And that's another big part of what I do at the moment, is I do as much media and lobbying as I can to ensure that, you know, the government changed the law 3 years ago. They really simply cannot wash their hands of it and say, we changed the law, now it's up to doctors. That simply is not the experience of patients within the UK. They are not experiencing, even when doctors do want to prescribe, there is no money, there is no pathway, there is no availability. So there is many problems we need to iron out. But what I do feel strongly is that if we create this domestic sector, that those issues will iron out when the government, sadly, I think in some ways, when the government realise that there's a lot of money to be made for the economy, because, you know, we've been lobbying on the patient side for a long time. That's really important to many of us who have disabled or chronically ill family members or children, but sadly that's not always what the government have been thinking about. And I think we really need to make it very, very clear that there's a very, very good, robust sector that can be developed here if they just open their eyes and look at it and work with us on that. So that's a lot of work we're doing as well behind the scenes. So I think that's about it for me. Thank you very much for listening, and yeah, thanks very much for inviting me as well.